This is the Ground Game Podcast, where we cover politics from the ground up. Here are your hosts, Tom LoBianco and Patrick Pfingsten.
We are almost 2 weeks out from Election Day, and I think the world is getting darker and drearier and meaner. You were all
That's
Mr.
the rotation
Positive
of the Earth, man. That's the seasons.
You were all Mr. Positive last week. Oh, these people are going to have backbones, and they're going to be so tough, and they're going to stand up for what's right.
Take some vitamin D.
They're all jellyfish.
Get out, see the sun.
I live in the Midwest. I won't see the sun until May.
Jesus, man. That's just so grim.
All right, welcome to the Ground Game. I'm Patrick Pfingsten. That's Tom LoBianco. He writes the great newsletter 24 site, 24sight.news. Longtime political reporter, national political reporter. I'm a former Republican hack, turned anti-Trumper, turned newsletter writer, radio host, all sorts of stuff. But we're here. We're here to talk politics. We're here to see what's coming the next couple of months, because it is it's going to get messy.
It is. I'm ready.
How are you feeling? How are things in you're outside of DC? I'm a Midwesterner. What's the feeling out there right now?
It reminds me a lot. I was actually asking somebody, what's going to be the Trump hotel of this administration? Because it's like a bad mafia.
I forgot
movie.
He sold it. I completely forgot he sold the hotel.
Right. Yeah, so you need to have a place where you're putting money into the mob boss's pockets in order to buy access, right? That's kind of how that works. And I don't know yet. I haven't figured that out. But yeah, Washington's back to a mafia mentality for sure.
Greasing the skids at the Hay Adams.
There's going to be some of that for sure. At the aptly named Off the Record bar.
It feels like we're just cascading toward crazy, and I don't know what comes next. I like to know what comes next, and I don't know what comes next this time, and that's concerning to me, especially with all the constitutional questions. Kim Wehle, who is a legal professor at the University of Baltimore, as you Marylanders would say, also an ABC News legal analyst, has a new book out called Pardon Power: How the Pardon System Works. She'll join us to talk about the darkness. Hello, darkness, my old friend. that's abounding, and get her perspective from the legal side and the constitutional side, which I think will be good. You want to get into it?
Let's do it, baby.
First down.
All right, the flunkies are among us. Trump has made his big set. Most of his cabinet picks at this point. I don't have a flow chart or anything, but as I don't know that they were even all out the last time we were here. But the crazies are among us. RFK Jr. for HHS, Matt Gaetz and his proclivity for women under the age of 18 for Attorney General. Kristi Noem in the mix, Tulsi Gabbard, who may not be, but is definitely a Russian asset for DNI. This is a group of absolute unqualified. Pete Hegseth and his nice hair.
His hair's qualified.
Really unqualified group of people for these jobs. And then Trump's running around like with his Jets and the Sharks at the UFC fight this weekend with RFK Jr. and Mike Johnson and Don Jr. and Elon Musk and they're all eating McDonald's on Trump Force One, and it's just it feels like the worst bro movie of all time.
Yeah, it's right. It's like a buddy cop movie. It's like Tango and Cash 5, straight to DVD, not even Blu-ray. Maybe you pick it up at Redbox.
So is Trump Turner and is Elon Hooch, or is it the other way around?
Oh, I think that's being decided right now. Something I wrote, and Patrick, you did aptly point this out before we jumped on air. I did nuke my Twitter account, and I'll tell you why. Okay, as a professional reporter, I saw it as a conflict of interest covering a White House that this is effectively the publishing platform of that White House. And that appeared to me to be a conflict of interest, seeing as I'm writing about them. So I'm over at Blue Sky now, and I'll tell you the engagement at Blue Sky has been very good. The engagement on Substack has been very good, very much like old Twitter. Okay. And I pointed this out. That photo, the bad buddy cop movie with RFK Jr. eating Mickey D's fries while talking about the evil of chemicals.
With the
All the
Coca-Cola
fluoride.
in front of him.
Yeah, it's all that. Um, we are going to see a million of those photos. I guarantee, because we've already seen this administration. And the thing to pay attention to is not those photos. I was sitting down. It's not nearly as riveting as watching RFK Jr. be a hypocrite in public. That's clowning. That's trolling. I was sitting down with the Federal Register, reading the Schedule F regulations, which you can see. And we know this as reporters. I mean, you're an old radio guy. You can actually go in and see the debate in the public comments portion. Now, that's not a congressional hearing, but it is a public document. My argument to folks is avoid the clown show. There's a reason that so many people in this country have tuned us out, because we've been feeding and playing to the clown show for almost a decade now. And everybody, regular people in America, are like, yeah, we get it. There's real news out there. So I'm writing more off of the Federal Register these days.
That's exciting reading. As someone who's done his share of ag policy work, having to read through EPA Federal Register filings has taken much of my life away. But and maybe that's the thing, don't get distracted by the shiny objects and get distracted by what they actually do.
Yeah.
The question is, what are they actually going to do? Are they actually going to be able to tie their shoes to do anything? And I have doubts that they can. We're not talking about qualified people here. We're talking about the Keystone Cops.
I talked with somebody about having an acting attorney general go in there. Remember, a lot of these guys are professional politicians. Matt Gaetz, despite allegedly being a groomer based on testimony,
Coke-addled.
based on testimony. I was not there for those sex parties. I can't tell you. This feels like Dave Chappelle with R. Kelly. He's like, I'm gonna need.
Tom would want to be there.
You know what? Hey, that was a wild time. 2017, 2018. Remember that, man? Chappelle's like, he's like, man, I'm gonna need. A mama's gonna have to see this. And grandmama is like, two of my cousins definitely gonna have to see this before I know it's real. And like goes around the rooms like 20 people. Look. Matt Gaetz is a career politician. He's the son of a career politician.
President of the Florida Senate.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. These guys have been angling for top positions like attorney general for years and years and years. I would not underestimate their ability to actually know how to wield these things, because all you have to do is you bring in people that actually know what they're doing. All right. And he's the guy that, and he'll, and whenever he wants to distract somebody, he'll go to the MI6 Chinese salon spa and go get injections into his eyebrows again. All right. And he'll come out looking like the Joker, and we'll all be like, oh, what happened here?
The thing with Gaetz, though, Gaetz isn't stupid.
Exactly.
You can make an argument that a lot of Trump world is stupid. No. Gaetz is not stupid. He's a shithead, but he's not stupid.
Right.
And he knew that convincing Trump, saying the right things on Trump Force One, getting himself in line for AG, gets him all the publicity in the world. It doesn't matter if he serves one day as Attorney General. It sets him up for a run for governor of Florida in 2 years. To hell with the cocaine or the girls or whatever else.
Exactly.
These are the people we're dealing with. It's all about
he's been tacking his entire life. He's like Mike Pence, always, thinking about the next move.
Yeah, that's what we're dealing with here.
It's second down.
All right. So early Monday, I think it was 4 a.m. Eastern time Monday, Donald Trump retweeted or truthed or whatever they call that action on his fake social media site, Truth Social, from Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch, essentially saying he had heard that the Trump administration was going to use military action to deport people. Trump then retweeted, reposted, whatever word you want to use, in the affirmative that it's something that they're talking about. I can't help but think of posse comitatus, where you can't use the military for civil law enforcement, for domestic law enforcement. What's your reaction to Trump implying at least that he's going to use the military to deport people?
I mean, yes, it's absolutely on the table. And I think that we will see it adjudicated. We've known for a while, and groups like the Brennan Center, a lot of the groups on the left that have been preparing for this, this will move through the courts. My guess is that he'll try it, he will do it, and then we're going to see a flood of cases through moving up through the courts, through district, circuit, up through appellate, the regional appeals courts, and ultimately to the Supreme Court itself. I mean, the Supreme Court is going to be a very busy place. John Roberts is going to have a lot of cases to look at, and maybe we'll even see some additional court leaks of opinions, like what happened with Dobbs 2 years ago. But
because today in this world, what we need is our perfectly apolitical Supreme Court of the United States.
I'm watching the courts for this one, not the Federal Register, by the way.
I wonder what the consequences are, right? I mean, I still think the hyperbole that Trump is going to try to deport 10, 12, 15, 20 million people is just, I don't think it's realistic.
Yeah.
Because one, are you going to have local law enforcement knocking down doors in Berwyn, Illinois? Well, you can't do it in Illinois because essentially law enforcement in Illinois is banned from working with ICE. But in Laredo, Texas, and rounding people up and throwing them across the river, say good luck in Juarez. They're not going to get that kind of cooperation from local law enforcement. It's just not. They don't have the resources for that. You're not going to be able to call up the National Guard for something like that, and a judge will put a stop to any effort to do it. Yeah,
and I mean also too, do they want to wreck? Especially, I mean, this as an ag guy, do they want to wreck the agricultural industry?
They don't give a shit. They don't give a shit. He tried to wreck the ag industry in 2018, whenever he did the tariffs with China and got us into a trade war with our number one buyer of United States soybeans, and then had to dig into the deficit even further to bail out farmers. I mean, they don't give a shit about that. They only care about what works for their top of the agenda, right? It is we don't like brown people. And that's the position of the Republican Party today. And that kills me as someone who spent much of his adult life trying to elect good Republicans. And that's not what they're about anymore. They don't care about the economy. They don't care that tariffs are going to raise prices on everyone, when cost of living was the number one issue that voters cared about in this election. They don't care. Because they only care that it helps whatever dear leader wants. That's it.
I'm going to give you the jaded political reporter view on this. I think that starts changing the instant poll numbers start coming out. And we have seen Trump in action before, and the right mega donor gets into his ear and says, "Hey, now you're messing with my bottom line." And they won't present it like that. They'll do what Putin does, which is, well, you're very brilliant and you're very smart. And as somebody who is very brilliant and very smart, this would be the way to handle this.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that they're going to talk tough between now and January 20th, but when the rubber meets the road, I don't know that they're actually going to be able to pull it off. All right, next. So you sent me a Substack that we're not going to post here because it used a lot of F words, where essentially they made the argument that Joe Biden should be pre-pardoning everybody on Trump's enemies list. Everyone from Adam Schiff to Nancy Pelosi to Liz Cheney to you and me, probably. Where does this come from? Where does this idea? Is anyone taking it seriously? Because the Biden administration sure doesn't seem like it's freaking out right now.
Well, I'll tell you, that's it's a closed door operation over there. I mean, look, as you know, we'll talk about this with Kim Wehle, who's an expert on this. But I mean, all of the legal boundaries, the constitutional boundaries, all this stuff applies equally to any president, whoever that president is, and in this case, Biden. I mean, is there real talk out there about preemptive pardons? Yeah. Is there real talk from a number of Democratic defense lawyers? Like I read an article with Mark Zaid, who does a lot of NatSec stuff. I think he did a lot of stuff around Trump Russia back in the day. It's macabre, but this is real. It's part of facing reality, is facing the darkness head on. He said that he was expecting to have a big surge in business as a result of this. I mean, potentially you should have. Maybe you should have Democratic defense lawyers on retainer, and that
didn't Bannon. I think Bannon said last week that they need to lawyer up.
Yeah, but also that's Bannon. He's not in the White House. And
does he have any swing at this point? I don't know.
Yes, he does. But I'm going to point something out, and this is really important to understand. This is really key. Remember, this whole shock and awe thing that they're doing right now is meant to cloud people's minds. All right, this is like it's not clearly not a Jedi mind trick. I guess it's like a Sith mind trick.
That's
there
going over my head. I don't do Star Wars.
Oh, they always come in pairs. It's don't pay attention to the rhetoric. Trump world is the same Trump world that it's always been. That's why I know from talking with my sources, from watching them operate. There are factions inside of Trump world, and Bannon and Trump Jr. clearly represent one faction. It is not the only faction, and that's what he does. He's been saying people are going to go to jail for forever. You got to watch how the different factions operate inside there, and that's what I'm watching for.
We'll keep an eye on it. I keep getting more questions about no other topic than what's the Senate going to do about these nominees? And I wonder what the political considerations are here. You have an election in 2 years. Susan Collins is up. So, and she's indicated that she's running again. So she's probably not likely to just jump on board with all of the Trump nominees in a D+8 state or whatever it was. Tom Tillis is up again. He's going to be one of the key targets for Democrats in 26. But then really any of these other people who are on the fence, the Murkowskis, the Todd Youngs, the McConnell's a lame duck at this point. John Curtis from Utah, who just got elected. None of them are facing immediate political challenge, whether it be from someone in the middle, or I guess Bill Cassidy from Louisiana would potentially have a primary in 26 if he were to vote down any of these nominees. But what do you think are the political considerations for senators as they take on these? It's some of the controversial nominees are one thing, but some of the outright batshit crazy nominees are the real problem.
Yeah. It's so leverage In votes, obviously as we've been talking about here, is somebody safe? And fittingly enough, this is one of the reasons the founding fathers made it this way, as opposed to 2-year cycles in the House. It's 6 years, so you do have some more, a little bit more leeway. Some of these guys are looking; they have to be at least looking past Trump in 2028 and seeing where the future is right now. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of reticence in the Senate from, Trump says, all right, we're going to do recess appointments for everybody that you hate. That's why you haven't seen the total acquiescence on this so far. So, we have to watch the terms. All right. And again, not just 2026, but also 2028. Now, as you noted there, will Democrats be able to flip the Senate? That's a tough map. It's pretty interesting how tough of a map that is for Democrats, right there. Assuming that what's his name, McCormick holds on in Pennsylvania, that's still 53-47. They would have to pick up 3 seats. And I don't see that in that map as it stands right now. Now, the flip side of that is, and this kind of gets to the moderating of the crazy. Okay, if you put in tariffs and the price of eggs doubles from $7 to 14, like if we become like Venezuela, where you're rolling around buckets of cash that is worthless, like something out of Reconstruction almost. People who show up in midterms traditionally, and I hesitate to say traditionally, after the last election, tend to be more the activist type, and usually from the opposition party. That has the ability to really put a lot of folks in jeopardy on that map and potentially swing things. I mean, look, there's Alaska is surprisingly swingy. All right, Mary Peltola won that seat a little while ago, and then she lost it. I think it was Nick Begich. But you look at like Dan Sullivan's up. It's not that long ago they had a Democrat up there for senator. There's a lot in play on this map,
and it's not even just Republican seats. I mean, Democrats have a lot to defend. I mean, they've got Ossoff up. Mm-hmm. They've got Gary Peters up. They've got Tina Smith up. Gene Shaheen up. Ben Ray Lujan up. All in inside our D+5 states. Virginia is D+3. I mean, so Warner, is even. So it's. I mean, they not only have to pick up, but they have to defend multiple seats too. And that's
a good point.
Generally, it's going to be a bad year for Trump, you would assume, because it just trend lines tell you that's how it goes for a president in the midterm. But it's certainly interesting to see how the Senate and its self-preservation will always rue the day. All right, let's get to our guest, Kim Wehle. She is a law professor at the University of Baltimore, ABC News legal analyst, has a new book out. Talk to her about our eroding Constitution.
It's time to go in the huddle.
All right, so this constitutional crisis we seem to find ourselves living in is coming at us like a meteor from space. To help us walk through that, we have Kim Wehle, who is a legal professor at the University of Baltimore. So I'm going to have to keep you Baltimore kids from talking pit beef and crab cakes and Lamar Jackson for the whole time. So keep on track, humans. She's also an ABC News legal analyst and has a new book out called Pardon Power, How the Pardon System Works, which is essential reading considering where we're at right now and who Donald Trump is probably going to pardon once he hits office again on January 20th. So, Kim, I'm trying not to be overly the sky is falling here, but I'm certainly frustrated by where we're at. I'm certainly concerned as to what steps Donald Trump may take outside of the guardrails of the Constitution. Let's just start here with a broad situation of where do we stand in terms of the Constitution and our norms and what's at threat here?
Well, I wrote a column for Politico back in 2022, January, February 2022. That was a follow-up to a thought experiment I did with my law students, where we went through the Constitution and all the guardrails back then after the first Trump administration and asked what is left. What worked? Impeachment didn't work. Appropriations from Congress as a constraint on the executive didn't work. Congressional oversight investigations didn't work. 25th Amendment didn't work. Pressure from the press, kind of like the shaming element that existed probably 10 years ago, didn't work, on and on and on, and decided the only thing that was really left was a criminal indictment. And we've seen 4 of those. And then the Supreme Court came in this summer and basically held that the president of the United States can commit crimes using the massive power of the office, including the U.S. military and the Department of Justice and the FBI, which I think is the biggest potential threat, which for reasons we can talk about. So the game board has shifted substantially since June, and since I wrote that column in 2022. So unfortunately, the answer is the best we can hope for is some kind of personal integrity or self-selecting hard stop in Donald Trump's brain, because the guardrails are gone for all intents and purposes. I mean, is impeachment going to work? No, not with this Senate. I don't know what it is. The states are still functioning. So meaning, I think there's 32 states that have Republican legislatures. I'm not sure what the governor count is, but we do have a divided government. I'm sorry?
27-23.
27-23. So we have a divided government in terms of federalism, that we have some level of state sovereignty, but the states don't control the military. And we also have the judicial system. So I think we will see an uptick in litigation suing the Trump administration and getting judges to issue orders, judicial orders, stopping some of the worst pieces of things. Or if the Department of Justice pushes forward a bogus indictment or an investigation in a retaliatory manner, which again, the Supreme Court has said is above the law, will the judges stop that? I think a lot of them will. So that's the good news. The bad news is, I think everyone who pushes back on Trump, whether it's the press, whether it's a member of state government, whether it's a judge, whether it's a judicial law clerk, whether it's a prosecutor at the state level, whether it's a member of the academia that's saying something, whether it's someone within the federal government that came up with a conclusion based on research that's antithetical to the platform. I think everyone now has to worry, or could worry, about retaliation, because the Supreme Court has said he can retaliate at will. The Supreme Court specifically said that communications with his attorney general are above any legal scrutiny. Directives to his attorney general to commit crimes are now above any oversight or scrutiny. So we are left with the question, will Donald Trump decide not to follow through on his over 100 pledges to prosecute his political enemies? Now, I'm not so confident, given his track record, that he will just stop and say, no, I didn't really mean that. I don't want to do that. I haven't seen any evidence that man will do that. Now, people will say, well, maybe others will stop him. I don't know. He's being pretty careful to vet those, not only in his cabinet, but doing Oppo research on longstanding government employees. Is his Project 2025 loyalty filter? I'm not that persuaded by that. Then people would say, well, who's going to stop? Why would someone execute a constitutional order or direct or legal or unconstitutional order? They're not covered by immunity, but this gets to my book. He can pardon them. So you can pardon people, and then they can commit crimes at your behest. So I just in terms of logic, just in terms of, okay, what's the disincentive to commit crimes to in an vindictive way, or to shore up your power? Law is all about incentives and disincentives. I'm not seeing the tickets for speeding through the Constitution right now. You could say, oh, the last one, the Senate, right? You might know more about this. We've got the Congress as a pushback. That isn't giving me a lot of comfort lately, given that we're not seeing any public pushback to some of the picks for his cabinet, which, setting aside loyalties, just don't even seem to pass basic tests for competence for these very, very weighty, important tasks, like running a massive Department of Justice, for example.
Kim, let me ask you some extreme examples here. We talk about, and it's a good thought exercise to swap in names and swap out names when talking about potential actions. And obviously one of the things he's very good at is targeting people with threats. Like Trump has said, he wants to put Pelosi in prison. He wants to prosecute Kamala Harris. Realistically, could he, because we've seen this before his administration, where he gets angry at people around him for having a little too much limelight, like Steve Bannon, for instance, in 2017. Could he do the same thing? Could he logistically actually imprison somebody like Elon Musk just because? Is that a possibility?
Okay, well, there's two pieces to that. One is, and some have said, well, you can't prosecute someone with no evidence. That's only kind of true, right? You can certainly open an investigation into someone with no evidence. You'd have to have probable cause that a magistrate judge would sign off on to get a warrant to search someone's personal property, for example. But there are other techniques that the law enforcement apparatus can use to start an investigation, to bully someone, to intimidate them, to really make their life very difficult. Of course, an indictment would have to be signed off by a grand jury or by a magistrate judge if it's an information, but grand juries notoriously don't necessarily have the legal expertise to assess the quality of the evidence, and they're secret. And there isn't opposing counsel. The defendant's lawyer or the target or subject's lawyer is not in the grand jury saying, no, this evidence is bogus. So I think using the criminal justice system to go after enemies when there really isn't any there is possible in a way that could create a chilling effect, could scare people, have the IRS start looking into your stuff. As far as kind of just throwing someone in prison, that I think there'd be a number of obstacles, right? There has to be some due process under the Constitution before you can just be picked up and put in prison. Although if you're low income in the United States and you can't make bail, the way our prison system and our criminal justice system works is you can actually serve your entire sentence without a scrap of evidence against you. That won't be Donald Trump. He seems to skirt the law compared to other people. But, I'm not an expert in sort of the scope of the statutory regimes that govern the military. There certainly are stories of, renditionings of people in connection with national security interests. I really don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to do more research on that. But I can tell you, Tom, that the Supreme Court's immunity decision says that if the president's using his, quote, core powers or the outer boundaries of his official power, it's above the law. So if he were to direct a military officer to arrest Elon Musk, they'll just get in a black van and pick him off the street and he disappears. The question becomes, what can be done about that? So would that, say someone, Elon Musk's family, files a lawsuit against Donald Trump, claiming, some kind of constitutional violation, a Fourth Amendment violation, having seized his person? Would the Supreme Court say, well, that's the execution of a military order. You cannot look into the reasons behind that order. You cannot get access to the evidence bearing on that order, because all of that the president is personally immune from. Now, there might be scrutiny in other mechanisms, like, okay, you're not trying to hold the president criminally liable for doing that. But there's a lot of question marks now around the scope of that decision and how much it protects a presidential order. The question with Donald Trump has never been, can he do it under the Constitution? The correct question is, if he does it, what's the consequence? If there's no consequence, the answer is yes, he can do it because he got away with it. Presidents prior to Donald Trump didn't try this stuff. So again, it's back to my earlier point. Do we trust in this moment that he's not going to try to do the things he's promised to do in Project 2025, or his handlers, his supporters have said, or he said from the campaign trail? I don't have a lot of confidence that he won't try it. And he probably believes, between the Supreme Court's opinion and having won the popular vote, he has now more authority or a mandate to do these things than he did in 2016. And he did some pretty extraordinary and extreme and troubling things in 2016.
I think that leads us into, we're recording this Monday afternoon. There was a Truth Social post this morning from Tom Fitton with Judicial Watch, where essentially he said that the Trump administration is considering using the military for actions against immigrants, whether they're legal, illegal, etc. And Trump retweeted, whatever that term is for the Truth Social fake social media site, but essentially answered in the affirmative. The first word that comes to my mind, first words, are posse comitatus, that you can't use the military for civil actions. I guess, one, is it realistic that he does engage the military? Who can stop that? And then what are the consequences, which you've already talked about?
Yeah, I haven't looked at the Posse Comitatus Act in a long time. But again, the question is, if he violates the law, what's the pushback? The Supreme Court has said, so long as he's using his official power, his core power, he can violate the law all he wants. He cannot be prosecuted. Now, the government itself might be sued to get an injunction to stop illegal acts. And then the question is, okay, well, could people executing on criminal acts separately be prosecuted? And then, as I said, I think this president could pardon them all, and they would become immune from that. I did a column last week for The Hill that sort of sketched out the various pushbacks, the guardrails that are left. And I'm not a military expert, but there's, I think, over 300,000 officers in the military. And under the military code, enlisted people, the lowest level infantry people, they take an oath to the Constitution, to the president, and to their superior officers. Everyone above that level only takes an oath to the United States Constitution. So they would be, by my reading of that, duty bound to ignore unconstitutional or illegal orders, notwithstanding that they came from the president or they came from superior officers. Then the question becomes, okay, how many of them will step outside the chain of command and adhere to their oath? If they do that, will they be retaliated against, even if they do the right thing? Will there be retribution for them? the bigger concern I have across the board is, will these threats, and if he acts on even one or two of them, to one or two people or one or two uses of the military, which he contemplated, right, the last round, and he had folks that pushed back on him that are not going to be in this administration. Some of whom who said they're concerned about his flirtation with fascism. My concern is that the massive power of the military at his fingertips, the massive power of the Department of Justice, the FBI, federal law enforcement, interrogation techniques, the ability to use surveillance technology, all these things, that creates a culture of fear that people now in America, for the first time probably ever, I can't speak to the many hundreds of years of enslavement, and of course that's a totally different story, enslaved human beings in the United States. But I'm just saying in modern history, where will people feel like, whoa, if I do the right thing in my capacity as a federal employee or military officer, if I speak my mind on Instagram or on Facebook or on a podcast or in writing this op-ed, will I be next on the enemies list? Then will I not speak? Will I be quiet? Will the press stop covering him in an honest way? Will I be worried about having a Zoom and then this comes up that I have to be quiet? Will I not tell my students what's going on? Because I don't want whatever is going to happen, I don't want it coming for me. That is a different United States of America. It's not even what does he do, but does he do enough that people are afraid they could be next? And does that change the whole dynamic of our liberty and freedom? And I'm talking specifically about the First Amendment, freedom of association, freedom of speech. Because again, it's all about incentives and disincentives. What is Donald Trump's disincentive from violating the law right now? It's hard to figure out what that is. What's the pushback? What's the consequence? Now, for the rest of us, what's the disincentive for speaking out against Donald Trump? That has now become really different than it's ever been in American history, than it was under Joe Biden, and that it even was under Donald Trump in the first administration, thanks to the conservatives on the United States Supreme Court.
Why do you, and this is all some very heavy stuff and some very dark stuff. And I'm glad that we're doing this because we have to face it head on. There are no hiding under a rock in this.
Yeah. I say this, if you've got a lump in your neck, oh, I don't want to get it checked out because so long as I pretend it's not actually there, it will go away. No, it'll metastasize and you'll die, right? You need to go to the oncologist and you need to get the biopsy and you need to sit there white knuckled with your family and hear the news so that you can get it treated before it's too late. So I'm very sensitive to what I say scares people, and I'm not trying to scare people, but I think if we don't hear it, we can't do anything about it. Just to be clear, Tom, I would love, I'm all ears, I'm open. I want to hear how I'm wrong. I really want to hear where are the points where there will be pushback. And I wrote this column for The Hill, and my editor told me it was the #1 piece on the website that day, which to me means people want to hear.
Yes.
This. They want to hear how the courts are still working. They want to hear how the states still can push back, and Gavin Newsom and others are shoring up things. They want to hear what they can do. They want to hear the alternative. And frankly, it's unfortunate that the Biden administration isn't using the bully pulpit in the last few weeks of office to give some comforting words of strength on where there are ways that we're not going to fundamentally changed our system of government in a way that it cannot be turned around in another administration and in the next election.
Kim, before we let you go, I'm going to play devil's advocate for you.
Thank you.
If you'll allow me. My Republican friends who have, been pretty antagonizing the last couple of weeks, as you can imagine, they tell me, why do you think this is so different? We did this 4 years ago, 8 years ago. You may not have liked it, but the wheels didn't fall off the Constitution. The Republic is still here. He left the White House in 2020, even though he bitched and moaned about it, and still bitches and moans about it. And even though he sucks, if he sucks, which I clearly think he does, he's not going to end 250 years of our republic. Is there any of this that is just a little bit of, I don't want to say partisan hyperbole, but maybe a little too much fear and loathing in Washington, D.C.?
Well, again, I'm a law professor and I've studied the Constitution, and I'm actually trying to think very logically. So in response to that, again, the immunity decision changed the definition of executive power under Article 2. The Supreme Court added language to the Constitution, ignored the part of the impeachment clause that says you can still be prosecuted for offenses, high crimes and misdemeanors that would include official power. It ignored the fact that the Article 2 of the Constitution says you shall take care that the laws are faithfully executed, meaning you're not committing crimes. It changed the incentives, right? So post Trump versus US, there wouldn't be a Mueller investigation. In terms of at least the part of it that dealt with his acts of obstruction relating to the Mueller investigation itself. John Dean wrote the foreword of my book, Pardon Power, How the Pardon System Works and Why. He was White House counsel under Nixon. He wrote in that there would have been no Watergate. Everything that Nixon did that was perceived as being criminal, and there was an indictment ready to go apparently until Ford pardoned him, that would now be completely protected. So, he's one person, but he lived through those years. That literally means the course of American history would have been different had this opinion been on the table in the 1970s. So that means to me, we are now in a different world. Also, I don't think we were talking about the kinds of wholesale changes with a Congress with both houses in his pocket, right? So he's talking about bypassing advice and consent to put his cabinet together. Advice and consent is there as a check, right? We're not an unlimited monarchy. It's checks and balances. And the idea is, no, you have to have someone else grading your papers and checking your papers. If he bypasses advice and consent, that means no background checks. That means no ensuring through the FBI process that people aren't being put into government that are paid Russian assets, that are spies. Well, that Mitch McConnell, when pushed back on Barack Obama's recess appointments, it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Supreme Court said you need 10 days of recess before you can do a recess appointment. That stopped, and it hasn't been done since then. But if you've got two houses of Congress willing to recess for 10 days, which we don't know that they won't do that, then you have unlimited power in Donald Trump. You have unlimited power in Donald Trump, and we don't know where his allegiances lie. And I say this because the Mueller report, some people disagree, but if I'll debate that if they've read all 400 pages, which some of us have. He found there was collusion with the Russians. Now that's not a legal term, but that's a logical term. There was some coordination with Paul Manafort, his campaign manager, and the Russians. So I just, this is not 2016. Also, you've got, Milley and others, and, you've got many people that were within his administration the last round where he didn't know that he would, by all accounts, be in office in 2016. So he put career establishment Republicans around him. He's not going to do it this time. He's promised not to do it this time. You're talking about Schedule F. If he does manage to pepper at least part of the federal government with loyalists, that's a very, very different government. That's not professionals that are going to make decisions based on facts and law and neutral policy objectives and what's best for the American people. They're going to do it based on loyalty to him. So I've heard that argument, but it's not 2016. It's 2024, and it's going to be 2025. We are in a different day. It's not persuasive to me. Well, it was okay last round. We've made it this far, so we'll always have democracy. That's not how it works. Say that to the Venezuelans. Say that to the Hungarians. Tell that to even the Russian people who had Gorbachev for a while. Tell that to the Ukrainians who are fighting for their democracy in this moment. That's just not how it works. The framers understood that it's human nature to amass, entrench, and ultimately abuse power. James Madison wrote in the Federalist, if men were angels, we would not need government. Government is there to push back on worse instincts. And my answer is, what is the government in place now to constrain Donald Trump's worst instincts that he has told us and promised us he will do, that millions of Americans voted to see done? I think there was energy in this election for a dictatorship. I think there are people that want someone to come in and say, it's my way or the highway. To hell with bureaucracy, to hell with the pesky Congress, to hell with the pesky states, to hell with all of that. We're going to push through this agenda with no constraints. That is his platform. That is not democracy. And
Tom's been all over this. So last word
democracy.
Here. Should Biden pardon the enemies list, the Liz Cheneys, the Adam Schiffs, the Pelosi's, down the list? Should he issue pardons ahead of time?
I think that Joe Biden should be using every lever of power he has in this moment to protect people against the tyranny that is being floated. So yes, I think he should pardon those folks because, by doing their jobs, they haven't done anything wrong. I think that he should do everything he could in this moment to use the power of his office to push back, including the bully public, including educating people about what is and is not constitutional, what is and is not the right way to run the office. And I think it's unfortunate that we haven't heard that out of the Biden administration in the waning days of his office.
Wehle, law professor at the University of Baltimore.
Hold on a second, Patrick. I'm going to squeeze one more in here. Just one more. This is important. Okay. This is do the exercise of swapping names out, subjects. Okay. Trump has said that he will not leave office in 2028. Okay, he's a president. All of this applies to a president in office right now. What if it's Joe Biden who doesn't leave office in 2 months, in January 2025? What would happen?
Well, I think all of this, including Trump versus USA, bets on the fact that Democrats won't push the envelope, right? So he's not going to do it. Could Joe Biden murder Donald Trump tomorrow and say it's in the interest of the best of the American people to not have a professed dictator take over the office? I think under Trump versus US, yes, he could, and he could not be personally prosecuted for that. Will he do it? No.
Right.
Now, to say this question of him holding office, 2 points. One is there's two ways he could do it. In theory, one is there could be an election and he just refuses to have whoever wins take over the reins of office. He uses the military to stop the counting of electoral college votes. He does something like Maduro did in Venezuela and says, too bad, voters, I'm staying. So he could do it by force. Or there's this kind of tortured reading of the 22nd Amendment running around where he could have, J.D. Vance run as president. He's the vice presidential candidate, and then J.D. Vance steps down and takes over, for a third term and try to get it within. I think that's a distorted reading of the 22nd Amendment. So those are the two
full
ways.
Medvedev there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's right. You nailed it, Patrick. I mean, this is what we're talking about. But I don't see how Joe Biden, I guess he could just stay, and he does control the military. So then the question was, how are you going to kick him out? It's just the Democrats play by the rules, and almost a little bit too much so, on the theory that, oh, golly gee, if we push the rules, then when the tables are turned, they'll push the rules against us, and we're well beyond that. So I don't really understand that logic. But this is where we are. But I do believe, can I just end on this? I do believe that the American people are innovative, and I don't think they've woken up to the threat yet. And I think the best case scenario is that people wake up to the threat. If it gets as bad as it could, that might then wake people up to why it matters to care about the structure of our government, not who wins, but the structure of democracy. And I'm open-minded and curious that if enough people wake up, we could have a better system on the other side. That best case scenario, Donald Trump's is forcing a different system, because in this moment, money and politics, and how it's captured both political parties, dark money, corporate money after Citizens United, means, in my view, that the business as usual was not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable under Kamala Harris. It's not sustainable. I don't know what it would look like, but I think best case scenarios is this shakes us all by the lapel to do something really different, and that in years from now, our children or our grandchildren are living under a truer democracy than we have going into the second Trump administration.
Kim Wehle, the law professor at the University of Baltimore, ABC News legal analyst, and the author of Pardon Power, which will pop on the screen there. How the pardon system works. Go pick that up on your Amazons, your Barnes and Nobles, or wherever you find your favorite books. Kim, thank you so much for the conversation. You are wonderful and insightful, and hopefully we can talk to you again if our Constitution still exists down the road.
Great talking to you. Thanks for having me.
It's time for the second half.
All right, here's our Q&A. You can send us an email, groundgamepodcast@gmail.com. Write us on Twitter at ground_game_pod, or find us on Blue Sky, which is dark and weird and scary, and I don't know where anything is.
Oh, you'll figure it out, man.
I'm so used to just the Twitter infrastructure that I don't know where anything is.
Dude, you're from the Midwest. Blue Sky is like learning how to tweak a carburetor.
I am not Tim Walz. I cannot tweak the carburetor in a 1979 Scout after I lose a national election. All right, first question. Do Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger running for governor in 2025, Sherrill in New Jersey, Spanberger in Virginia, do they represent a path forward for Democrats?
I think so, and we got to see how the electorate pans out on this. But they did pretty well in their re-elects. Well, I mean, Spanberger, I'm sorry, did backed out, but Vindman in that seat did pretty well. It's a potential path forward. It's these national security hawk Democratic women. So we got to see about how that plays out. And again, Virginia and New Jersey being the first major elections after every presidential are always seen as like a leading indicator of where the country is. Think back to 2013 with Chris Christie. I think it was Bob McDonnell way back in the day, back in Virginia.
McDonnell was 2009.
Wow.
Yeah.
There it is. Yep. Okay. So.
And then I think the Macker one in 13.
Yes. So I'm watching for them as leading indicators. Now, that doesn't mean that they win it. Doesn't mean they get out of their primaries. I think It's not Moskowitz out of Florida. Who's the other one? Moderate Gottheimer up in New Jersey. That Democratic primary in New Jersey could be real wild. That seems to be more of a big Democratic battle going on. But Virginia, Spanberger, it looks like Spanberger versus Winsome Sears, the lieutenant governor down there, who's a Tea Party MAGA, change your stripes based on whatever the flavor of the moment is, but pretty hard right Republican.
The question that I think Democrats will face here is the middle the route for them, because both Sherrill and Spanberger are centrist. I mean, they're center left for sure, but Harris just ran a center left to center right campaign, right? Left on abortion, social issues, etc. But even in some ways, even to the right of a lot of national Republicans these days on national security, and that didn't sell to the public. Well, so is the politics of moderation really what's going to sell here for Democrats in 25?
Well, it's not, you know what, and I think this is when we've talked about this before. I know I've written about it a fair amount. Not so much that it didn't sell, it's that it didn't get through. You can't sell something that doesn't get through to people. And they weren't, and they were not on the right platforms. They were not engaging in a proper way with this new media landscape.
I think not having an economic policy was problem number one for her. When people are complaining about the price of eggs and milk, and her answer is, I grew up a middle class kid. When Trump said, I'm going to make China pay more so that your prices come down, even though it's total bullshit. Yeah. Democrats just got completely blown away by it because they didn't have an answer.
Kim Wehle was saying there just a second ago, maybe Democrats need to get craven. Maybe they need to take a page out of the Trump playbook if they want to win, because clearly that sells. Just making up stuff on the spot, being like, oh yeah, if we bang up China, that's going to make everything real cheap.
Yeah. Well, that's the difference. Republicans have found a boogeyman and Democrats haven't, except for Donald Trump, and that's just not working. So it's like when Republicans tried to make Obama and Pelosi the boogeyman. Pelosi worked to a point, but Obama just never worked. No. Last one. How long before Trump and Elon break up, and then what happens?
Oh boy, I'm really bad at bets, but my guess is 8 months. I think 8 months plus or minus.
I don't know that you see Musk at the inauguration.
Oh, come on. He's Uncle Elon right now. That lasts at least a few months.
I think maybe I'm reading into it, but I think that Elon Musk is about Elon Musk and Donald Trump is about Donald Trump. And those two sorts of personalities are incongruent. And I have a really hard time not seeing some sort of blow up, because Elon's already caused friction over Treasury Secretary.
Yeah.
And that's a little thing in terms of the billions and billions and billions that he wants from the federal government. So wait till they really get into the weeds and he crosses Don Jr. or he crosses the boss himself.
Yep.
That's going to happen because dude's just camped out of Mar-a-Lago these days.
Yep. It's heading that way.
Yeah. Someone cue Taylor Swift and we are never getting back together ever. All right, Tom. Good show, long show. Appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. Thanks to Kim Wehle from the University of Baltimore Law School. She's awesome. Go read her book, Pardon Power, How the Pardon System Works. It's worth your time. And drop us a note, drop us a comment, a like, a subscribe. Find us on Blue Sky. Find us on Twitter. Find me on Twitter. Tom nuked his because he's a tough guy. And join us again next time here on the Ground Game Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
See you guys.